Hey, this is Troy from Planet 76. We've got some really good Sixers-focused content coming your way today. Make sure you subscribe to the pod so you can be in the know when we release new content. Enjoy the show. All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Planet 76 Podcast. This is episode 156 of the pod. Not too shabby, Michael, I just got to say. So my name's Troy. If this is your first time with us, welcome in. My name's Troy. Michael's here with me. As always, we are your hosts of Planet 76 and have been for all of that time, 156 episodes. So keeping with it, and we're rolling through the summer. July 25th is our date of recording this 156th episode. So I got a few things to get into tonight. Now, I mean, it's kind of an interest. We're kind of at that point now, Michael, in the offseason where, you know, the free agency rush is over. Even summer league just ended. Like, we're at that point. Training camp is still a ways away, and all that fun stuff. So kind of an interesting moment, but we got a few things to dive into for sure in this one. So why don't we start with this, Michael? Like, again, since things have kind of settled down a little bit, obviously the most recent thing is the Reggie Jackson deal. You can talk about that a little bit. But how are you feeling now that it's not like the immediate, okay, Paul George is here. We've had a little bit of time to let it settle and stir. How are you feeling with what the Sixers have done to get to, you know, July 25th right now? How are you feeling about where they are?
It's funny. I was talking to someone about this today, and what I was telling them was, as the days go on, I'm more and more confident, and I like more and more what the Sixers have done this offseason. As time has gone on the past almost month, which is crazy, it's really settled in, and I've really had time to think about it, and I'm thinking, this is legitimately the best team the Sixers have built around Joel Embiid since he was drafted here. And we're not even talking just star power alone, because you could argue Tyrese Maxey and Paul George are the best players he's ever played with, especially where Tyrese Maxey is in his career right now. But I'm more so talking about the depth around Joel Embiid, especially now with Oubre, Martin, Gordon, Jackson. I mean, this is really incredible and a testament to, one, obviously Daryl Morey. I don't think I've gone a single episode without talking about him, and that's not going to change. But also, I just think for some reason now, I just feel like the Sixers and the city itself is a more desirable location for players to want to join and go to. And I can't help but think that Paul George has something to do with it, because in years past, I don't think the Sixers would have gotten Caleb Martin, Reggie Jackson. I don't think they would have been able to get those guys. I don't think they would have been able to sign those guys. And I can't help but wonder if Paul George has something to do with it, because even though...
You posted about that too, I think, right?
Oh, yeah, I did, actually. I forgot about that.
I think you did,
yeah. Yeah, I did. Yeah. Even though they have Joel Embiid, I can't help but think that in years past, the Sixers don't get these guys. And part of me wants to think it's because Paul George has deeper connections in the league than Joel Embiid does, and I am kind of inclined to believe that. It just makes sense to me. So it would make sense that now that the Sixers have Paul George, Philadelphia becomes a much more marketable location to other players to want to play with. And even though they're role players, even though they're just solid bench players, it's still really important, and we've talked about this literally for probably 4 months at this point, having that depth is so important. And when you're a location that is enticing to said depth, it's noteworthy, and especially when you weren't necessarily a location for that depth to start, or even last offseason, like I just mentioned. I don't know if the Sixers would have got those guys last offseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think, you think about some of the stars that the Sixers have had. You think of James Harden. He came over in a trade mid-season or toward the end of a season. And then he had the next season. I don't really recall who the Sixers, just off the top of my head, who they brought in. But it wasn't like they've done this offseason. I think, like, when George comes in and, like, he's coming in the same moment that, you have to bring in some other depth pieces. Like James Harden, that wasn't the case. Right. It's more attractive. It's more, like, in the moment, kind of like, all right, Paul George is going, I want to go. It's not, as opposed to James Harden, it's like, well, James Harden was already there, and we saw what they did in the playoffs. Do I really want to go there? Like, Paul George, he's going now. I'm going with him. So I think you're right. I think you're onto something there because, especially you think about the deals that these guys have signed too.
Right. So you would agree that you see Paul George sign to the Sixers, and then you're looking at these other guys, and you gotta at least wonder if they're thinking, "Hey, whoa, Paul George just went there. Maybe I should go there." Yeah. Paul George, the best player available, just decided to go to the Sixers of all teams that he could have gone to. He decided to go there. Maybe I should go there. Maybe I should take less money to go there, like Caleb Martin did, or
exactly
Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, numerous
guys. Reggie Jackson could have got picked up. He could have made way more money than he did.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the market was like for him, but I can only imagine. Reggie Jackson is really good. I don't see a world where multiple teams weren't offering him more money. And this seems like a theme with the Sixers this offseason. They're getting players who could have made significantly more money with other teams, but decided to take less to go to the Sixers. What is that about? Kelly Oubre, Caleb Martin, Eric Gordon could have definitely signed for more than a vet minimum, even though he's not going to make a whole lot more than that. He could have easily made a couple million and maybe even gotten a multi-year deal. Reggie Jackson could have made more money than he did on a perhaps longer contract. So you have multiple really solid free agent guards / forwards taking less money on shorter contracts to come to the Sixers, and in Kelly Oubre's case, come back to the Sixers. What's happening? Because that wouldn't have happened last year. The Sixers haven't been a team to consistently be linked to really high quality free agents, and then have those guys choose the Sixers and turn down other teams for more money and fewer years on the deal. I don't know. I just can't help but wonder if Paul George had a lot to do with this, and something that I know I didn't think of, and I don't know if you can speak on this. I don't know if you thought of this either, because when the Sixers signed Paul George, all I was thinking was, wow, this is amazing. He's an awesome player. But I had never thought of, wow, Paul George, he's an awesome player, but he also could potentially lure other solid free agents here. I never thought. What about you? I mean, I don't. I'm sure maybe that thought crossed your mind too, but at least for me, it never even occurred to me that could have been the case.
I think when I think back even to what we've talked about, in the moments leading up to free agency and the days after, our number one concern on Planet 76 was you get Paul George, what the heck else are you going to do? And it's good to hear from you, now that the dust has settled a little bit and we're still feeling very, very happy with what they were able to do, because that was number one concern. We were a little scared about, okay, you get this 34-year-old Paul George, and then who are you going to bring in? But I'm excited that you're still excited because I'm still excited. You know what I mean? I am. I'm very pleased with what they were able to do and who they were able to bring in. Again, most recently, Reggie Jackson, and that's a pretty good get. I do want to. We're gonna play a little game here in just a moment. Called. They're both C's, so I didn't really come up with a name, but it's what are you confident in and what are you concerned with this team? So confident versus concern. But I'll give you one first that you can debunk. Yes. agree with, you can do whatever you want with before we even get into that segment necessarily. I've seen a couple posts saying the Sixers are too old. There's concerns about the age of some of the players on this team. There's obviously injury concerns with some of these key players on this team too. But you look around the NBA, anybody can get injured anytime, and that, there goes your season, right? Like if Joel Embiid don't play, Sixers aren't going to compete. If Paul George doesn't play, Sixers have very significantly less chances of making noise in the playoffs and what have you. So I'll just read out kind of the ages of this roster. You got Embiid, who just turned 30. You got Paul George at 34. Tyrese Maxey, 23. Oubre and Martin are both 28. Andre Drummond is only 30. I think some people think he's older than he is. KJ Martin, 23. Ricky Council, 22. Jared McCain, 20. Bona, 21. Gordon, 35. Lowry, 38. Reggie Jackson, 34. I think those three are kind of where the concern comes in, because those three have been very good, players in the NBA for their career, but they're older now. Has any of that crossed your mind? Is it specific to those three? Are you worried about Lowry and Jackson and Gordon, how they fit? Just kind of through your brain, because I have seen some posts, and I don't necessarily agree, but I mean, maybe I'm a little worried about those three in particular. Your thoughts on that?
I'm not worried, especially because you're not going to be relying on these guys for anything really significant. Obviously, Kyle Lowry helps in a more that he's the only real, well, I guess outside of Reggie Jackson, traditional point guard in a sense on the team. But you're still not going to be relying on him for a lot outside of some 10 minutes here and there for some shooting, for some ball handling. I don't really find that to be a concern. I just feel like they're so loaded, especially because those guys you mentioned are all guards. I just feel like they're so loaded at guard, especially depending on what kind of minutes Jared McCain gets, that I don't really think it's going to be a huge concern. And at the end of the day, Lowry and Jackson and Gordon, are... You need those kind of guys. They're guys who've won championships. They've been to the finals multiple times. They've won big games. They've been big pieces in really good teams, in really good organizations. You need those kind of guys on your team. Whether or not they are super impactful we're gonna find that out this season. But at the end of the day, them being there and you having them available to play when you need them for specific tasks is really important, despite their age. Okay, Lowry's 38. Okay, yes, he's in basketball. That's very old. And ordinarily, guys don't play much past that. And if they do, they're not going to be very good, or they're just going to be very injury-riddled. And unfortunately, Kyle Lowry...
But he shot 40% from three last year.
That's basically what I'm saying. He still provides a lot, and I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue, especially offensively.
Mm-hmm. So what if you like get your crystal ball out and you can see this regular season? I'm not even going to talk about playoffs, but like regular season as far as who's getting minutes, who's not. The way I can potentially see it is Reggie Jackson and Kyle Lowry, because you have both those guys, because they're both vets. They've been doing it a long time. They bring different things to the table. It's almost situational what you can do as far as plug and play in a lineup. Now, because of that, because Jackson's here, do you envision Kyle Lowry's role with this team being different and or less than what it was this previous season? He started the majority of his time here. He started in the playoffs, struggled a little bit at times in the playoffs. If you get your crystal ball, how does it shake out between Kyle Lowry and Reggie Jackson in particular?
It depends, because they're both kind of different players.
Mm-hmm. So could it be a situational lineup? Where,
I think it could be.
You
get different things with those guys. With Lowry, you get that 3-point shooting. With Reggie Jackson, with Reggie Jackson, you get more of a kind of dynamic player, a little bit better defensively. He's also half a decade younger now that you said. Is that true?
What did you say again?
I said you also get Reggie Jackson.
Oh yeah, Reggie Jackson's 34.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
not quite as good of a 3-point shooter as Kyle Lowry, although he's definitely had some years. Another Clippers connection. Let's pause for a second. I just got reminded of this. How many players on this team, with the Sixers, have played for the Clippers? You have Paul George. You have Eric Gordon. You have Reggie Jackson. You have KJ Martin. You have
Yep.
who else? That's it, pretty much, right?
That might be it on this current team, but you go back to last year, Batum.
I mean, Batum. Oh my gosh, Batum. Obviously.
Else.
Batum, Covington, Morris, Martin. Probably the same amount, honestly. And then if you count Harden, I mean, obviously they weren't on the team at the same time. But that's just insane. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a situational thing. I think both guys bring different skill sets that are both beneficial a lot of times. And I feel like they're very plug and play, and you can just play them where you need them because they're super impactful. And they both have a role here. They both are guys who you can play, and they'll both be very impactful, even despite the age and despite Kyle Lowry's injuries. I still think that's true.
All right, so let's get into what are you confident in and what are your concerns.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm not even gonna preface it in another direction. If you're ready, and then I'll hit you with some too myself. But
Yes.
What are you confident in with this team, based on anything we've talked about or something new?
What am I confident in? I think personally, I think there's a lot to be confident about, and a lot of that comes with Paul George because he does bring so much. Like we talked about, won't get too much into it here. Go watch our Paul George episode to get my full thoughts, get our full thoughts. I'm very confident in them defensively. I think adding Paul George definitely makes them more dynamic defensively because he can do so many things defensively. He was recently asked, I guess it was in his press conference on Tuesday, what is he going to do? What's his role?
Yeah.
Score the ball and guard the opposing team's best player. And I don't know if I've been as confident in a member of the Sixers at guarding opposing teams' really good player, especially when it's the Jason Tatum, LeBron James, Kevin Durant kind of player, as I am now with Paul George, because they haven't had a guy like that really maybe since Jimmy Butler. And it's crazy because you can draw so many parallels to that team because the Sixers have not had a player like Paul George since Jimmy Butler, and we're talking 5 years ago now, almost 6 years ago. So it's nice to have a guy who can just be like, okay, go out and guard him. Go out and guard this guy. Now, obviously, he's also getting quite older, so it's not going to be as plug-and-play style, and he's just going to go lock up the opposing defensive player. But at the same time, you have that luxury of a guy who can do a really good job of doing that, while also having that guy be really good at other things defensively. I think he's really good switching. He can guard multiple positions. He can help he can help in the paint. He can help defend the paint, whether it's Maxey or whatever. He can kind of roam. He can kind of be like what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, I guess just roamer defensively, and he can just kind of blow up plays defensively and just get involved defensively. And the Sixers haven't really had a guy like that either since Jimmy, and I don't even know if Jimmy really did that, honestly. I don't think that was really his play style defensively with this team. I think it was more of a team defense, but I feel like Paul George, I'm kind of ranting. Anyway,
I agree.
Anyway, yeah, I'm very confident in their defense, and not to mention Paul George aside, I think Joel Embiid is still one of the 10 best defenders in the NBA, and when you have that, I think you have a really good foundation. And then when you put Paul George on top of that, when you put really solid other wing defenders like Oubre and Martin outside of that, I think you have a recipe for a really good defense. I'm really excited for their offense too for a lot of reasons. Again, go listen to the Paul George episode that we did, and you can listen to what I think about that. But no, I think there's a lot of promise, and not promise, but I think there's a lot of potential for this team on both ends of the floor. I think
Yeah.
you can really build, especially with Nick Nurse as the head coach, I think you can really build a super dynamic team on both ends of the floor because you're going to have so many options, largely in part due to the fact that Paul George is here now.
Yeah. Defensively, yeah, no, I think that's a really, really great point because they haven't. Yeah, you're right. They haven't had a guy like that in years, and just the simple fact that if you, again, there's a lot of new pieces even coming in alongside Paul George this year. But if you just go back to last season, which isn't that long ago, adding Paul George into the mix is just the potential of what this team can do defensively is far greater. And if you want to make a run, you need a defender like him. Again, he's 34, but he's still more than capable. He's obviously very confident, right? I love that he said that in his press conference because he's confident in what he can do. He's coming off a season in which he played 70-plus games with the Clippers, and now he's a Sixer, and now he's teaming up with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. So obviously those three are something to be very, very excited about and confident in. But my confidence is, because that's an easy one. Right. But my confidence is in the fact that the next three guys, according to my thoughts on it, I'm very happy with. So you look at Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre, and Andre Drummond. We talked about some of the other guys, Reggie Jackson, Kyle Lowry, and whatnot, but those next three guys after our big three, I'm super pumped to watch. And Kelly Oubre was already here. Drummond was here a few years ago. But Caleb Martin is new onto the scene. And so to see how they can fit and mesh and, again, all capable defenders. Andre Drummond's a historic rebounding season a year ago. And he's coming off the bench. So I don't know how the starting lineup's going to shake out and how Reggie Jackson and them are going to fit in. But to me, what's most exciting is you got the wings in Martin and Oubre who are going to be massively important as part of this lineup. And then you got Andre Drummond, who's going to spell Joel Embiid and going to have monster games when Joel Embiid is out. Like that, we haven't been able to count on that since Andre Drummond was here. So pretty exciting stuff there. All right, switching gears for our last little segment here. What are some concerns, or maybe that's just the word that starts with C, so we'll stick with it. But what are some areas where you're like, I don't know, or you're a little on the fence, you're a little skeptical of?
I'll do one where I'm kind of nitpicking, and then one that's kind of obvious. So my obvious one is obviously the injury concern the injury concern. Well, and the playoff stuff, because Paul George, to be fair, being objective here, hasn't always been the best in the playoffs himself either, and a lot of that has nothing to do with injury like it does with Joel Embiid. He simply just kind of stinks it up in the playoffs, and I just can't help but bring up all the pandemic P stuff back in the bubble.
Yes.
So I would be lying to you if I said that wasn't concerning, at least a little bit. I think maybe in a different environment, it's not going to be as bad, especially playing alongside Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, that is, too. I think it could be minimized. Joel Embiid, too, obviously, the playoff stuff. But we've seen it, and when he's healthy, he's amazing in the playoffs. And this year, obviously, he wasn't healthy, but somehow he trudged through it, had the best playoff series of his entire career, had the best playoff game of his entire career, had his best playoffs of his entire career, checked every box of everything you could possibly want in the playoffs, maintained his elite defense, was the best player in that series, arguably, outside of Jalen Brunson, although he had his moments being better than Jalen Brunson. That would be my obvious concern, because that's just what it is. That's just the nature of this. We know how those guys tend to perform in the playoffs. So there's obviously cause for concern. I'm sure you would probably agree with that. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
My nitpicking is I'm a little concerned about their 3-point shooting, because outside of Maxey and George, at least in the starting five. Outside of Maxey and George, they don't shoot a ton of threes. Oubre took 5 last year, which is good. I would like him to shoot more, especially because he took 7 in Charlotte both years, and then he took 5.5.
And I feel like his percentage went down.
Yeah, and he only was 31%,
he was only around
which
30,
is really
right?
bad.
Yeah.
So I'd like...
And he was up there. He was up around 40, I felt like. Early in the
I'd
season,
like him to shoot more and perhaps make a little bit more.
Yes.
And then Caleb Martin is not too much better either from what I remember. Let me just double check, but I'm like 80% sure. Yeah, he's 35% on 4 attempts. So he's a little higher percentage-wise, but he's also fewer attempts. I need them to shoot more. Off the bench, I'm okay because you have Gordon, you have Lowry who will shoot, you have McCain who will shoot, you have Council who will shoot. Who am I missing? That's it? Yes?
You got...
See,
Council will
this...
shoot. McCain when he's in. Gordon will shoot.
It's so crazy now that the Sixers' depth is so good that I'm genuinely forgetting who they have on their bench.
Lowry will shoot.
I'm genuinely forgetting who they have on their bench because they're just so loaded. And it's trying to make sure you're accounting for everyone is something that I'm not used to.
Yeah.
Because the Sixers have never been this loaded off the bench. They haven't been.
Yep.
So I'm really excited for that. But I'm a little concerned with their 3-point shooting. Again, kind of nitpicking.
Okay.
If I have to, because I think there's some validity to that. Because, like I said, Embiid's not going to shoot a ton of threes, nor should he. Oubre and Martin need to shoot more threes. Because we know Maxey and George are going to get some threes. We know this, as they should.
They're going to get them up,
they absolutely should. It's one of their best attributes, individually. But I need Oubre and Martin to shoot more.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
I actually thought about that one for myself, but I'm not going to do it now. I did.
Well, you still can.
What's kind of even... No, I got another one. Over the last even few days, I've actually thought about that one in particular. Is okay, 3-point shooting, a little bit concerned with that. But the thing, and you mentioned it, the thing that kind of helps me, maybe that is a little bit of a nitpick because of how many threes Paul George gets up himself.
No, that's a good point.
Right, a lot of times you can because he shoots I think
that's a good counter though to say, okay, well they need to shoot more threes. But at the same time, Paul George takes a ton of threes.
You're bringing in a star who does,
and
right? Because a lot of times you can equate, you look at your stars and then you think you have to have 5 other guys that can shoot a lot of threes outside of them. But what if 1 or 2 of those stars shoot a lot of threes? And you mentioned it, Tyrese and Paul George both do.
Yeah, I mean, for his career, he takes 7. But recently, he's averaged about 8. Per game
he's up there.
He had kind of a stinker a couple of years ago, 35%. But, I mean, we're talking 38, 37%, 39% from 3 on average the past couple of years. And as the third guy, sometimes the second guy on offense, I can't imagine he's taking less than 7 threes a game. And especially because even though he's pretty much been the second guy with the Clippers, sometimes the first on offense, I can't imagine him taking anything less than 7 threes a game. I mean, for his career, he's 7 threes per game for his entire career. Obviously, his role's changed offensively throughout his career.
Right.
Especially this is now his 4th team. But
and now he's playing around Joel Embiid.
He's playing around Joel.
And he's with Tyrese Maxey. And so they're both going to get him up. And there's some guys off the bench that are going to get him up too. And I think that gives a little stability to that, but it is something to watch. I don't think it's going to be the horrid days of watching Al Horford out here. But
nothing will ever.
That is something to watch.
Nothing will ever match that.
If I had to pick a concern right now, it is the other guards alongside Tyrese Maxey. We've already touched on this a little bit with the age. You bring in a 34-year-old Reggie Jackson, super stoked about it. I was also super stoked about bringing in Kyle Lowry. And then you talk about Eric Gordon too. Three guys I'm just super curious to see how they're going to fit.
That's fair.
Who's going to get the most minutes? Is it going to be very situational? Heck, if we're playing this team, Kyle Lowry's going to get the more minutes. If we're playing this team, Reggie Jackson's going to get more minutes. Just very curious to see how that's going to play out. They're all vets. I think they're all going to bring something to the table. I think if they're all healthy, they're going to be a benefit to this team. But the other thing is, because we don't know how good or how much Jared McCain's going to play. Sure. These are the other guards, right? If you consider Oubre and Martin as forwards, then these are the other guards, and they're not young at all. Because another thing, it's not the Anthony Melton of last year. It's not
they're gonna miss Melton
of last year.
I think we talked about this last week.
My bad.
Good.
Should have brought him up. But yeah, if let's say for whatever reason, I hope I'm wrong. Let's say McCain just doesn't. He's not it this year. Then these are your other three guards, and they're 34 and over. So, just something to keep in mind.
I think there's some validity to that because, like you said, you made a good point. If they do rely on McCain a little more, but he doesn't pan out simply because he's a rookie, doesn't have a ton of experience, what does that look like?
Right.
Is it Jackson? Is it more Jackson? Is it more Lowry? Or are they just going to say, you know what, we're just going to go McCain and Maxey? There is a lot of avenues they can take, and there's a lot of paths they can take, and it's good because there's 82 games in the regular season, and I feel like a lot of people overlook the fact. I feel like a lot of people overlook that fact. There's 82 games in the regular season, and those 82 games are to experiment to see what works. Mm-hmm. And one thing about Sixers coaches of the past is they didn't do that. They would just cruise through the 82 games and just not really experiment with anything and just find one or two things that work. It makes sense, but at the same time, with the Sixers have so much depth and talent from top to bottom, it would make sense to try and move some pieces around and decide multiple things that work, because come playoff time, you have to be able to have multiple things that work, not just stick to one or two things and then have teams make adjustments to those things, and then you're done. You lose.
Right. Yeah. There's the good thing is, even with this nitpicking or whatever you want to call it, the good thing is the Sixers do have options, and a lot of teams don't have options, right? There's that's a luxury, and the fact that we're even talking about this and talking about who's going to get the minutes, and the reality is, if everybody's healthy, they have a lot of guys who can figure into this lineup and contribute. So a lot of that could be situational and going with a hot hand at times, or seeing who needs a rest one night. There's options, and again, I think a big one to me is just Andre Drummond is back. Let's keep him a whole season this time.
Let's not trade him, please.
Just watch the impact that he has, right? Because he was phenomenal. Best backup for Joel Embiid, period, and he's back. So that's really, really, really exciting, because I think he's going to provide stability. Joel's going to miss games, but Andre Drummond's here, so that's huge. All right, Planet 76 episode 156 is in the books. Make sure you follow us on all the platforms. Instagram, we let you know when posts are coming, or when new episodes are coming. Facebook, we're on Facebook too. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, I think is what it's called. We're there too. We're everywhere. Tell a friend. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Planet 76 is here.
We are on a new platform every week, it seems like, so you have no excuse not to listen or watch if you're on YouTube.
That's right. All right. We will see you next time on Planet 76. Peace. You just listened to an episode of the Planet 76 podcast. Hey, we appreciate you joining us for this episode. Whatever platform you're on, why don't you hit that subscribe button for us, and we'll see you next time.